The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. A so-called good start to high-stakes talks, the first major meeting since the U.S. and Israel struck the Islamic Republic last summer. Plus,
a new report takes a deep dive into one of the ICE watcher groups in Minneapolis. I'm Jeff Harris in Washington. Coming up, who they are and the allegations local elected officials are involved.
Then, ready to speak, but only if the world can watch. The requirements Hillary Clinton says she needs to discuss the Epstein case with lawmakers. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News. Now, thank you for being here. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and on this Weekend Edition, we take a look at the big headlines of the week and look ahead at what to expect, starting with Iran and nuclear talks in Oman. Iran's foreign minister describing the talks as a very good start, but so far, they've mostly focused on figuring out a way to hold future negotiations. U.S. representatives attending the talks, U.S. envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, didn't immediately comment. Talks are expected to focus on Tehran's nuclear program months after the U.S. bombed Iran's uranium enrichment sites. They also come with a backdrop of recent nationwide protests in Iran and a violent government crackdown. On Tuesday, a U.S. Navy fighter jet shot down an Iranian drone as it approached an American aircraft carrier about 500 miles off its coast. Tensions between the two countries spiked after Trump suggested military force against the regime in response to its bloody crackdown on nationwide protests that killed thousands of people. Let's take a look back at how the relationship with the U.S. and Iran got to where it is today. In the early 2000s, nuclear issues emerged when exiled dissidents claimed Iran was building two sites to build nuclear weapons. The U.S., EU, and UN, they then imposed sweeping sanctions on Iran in 2010, cutting the country off from global banking, resulting in their oil exports collapsing. By 2015, former President Barack Obama signs a deal with Iran, who agrees to limit their nuclear program in return for relief on sanctions. Just 3 years later, President Trump withdraws from Obama's deal and reinstates maximum pressure sanctions on Iran. Iran abandons the limits of Obama's deal and accelerates nuclear enrichment in retaliation. Under the Biden administration, talks stall in 2022, and Iran enriches uranium to 60%, making it near weapons grade. Then things heat up very quickly. In 2024, Iran and Israel exchange direct missile strikes for the first time in history. And that brings us to last year, when Israel hit Iranian nuclear sites. The U.S. followed suit, marking the first direct U.S. attack on Iran itself. A ceasefire deal was quickly reached 3 days later. More signs of cooperation between the Trump administration and Venezuela to take down key leaders who were part of Maduro's regime. Maduro's former frontman, Alex Saab, was arrested in Venezuela. Saab had been detained in the U.S. and charged in a massive bribery and money laundering scandal, but released back in 2020 as part of a controversial prisoner swap under the Biden administration. This marks a new level of collaboration between President Trump and interim President Delcy Rodriguez, who was Maduro's former deputy. A suspected key participant in the deadly 2012 attack on the U.S. compound in Benghazi that killed 4 Americans is now in custody.
We have never forgotten those heroes, and we have never stopped seeking justice for that crime against our nation.
Attorney General Pam Bondi says the suspect will face murder, terrorism, and arson charges. Bondi says he'll be prosecuted in Washington and landed in the U.S. Friday morning. Then U.S. Ambassador Christopher Stevens and 3 other Americans died in the Benghazi attack. President Trump held his first in-person meeting with a South American head of state since the capture of Nicolas Maduro, hosting Colombian President Gustavo Petro at the White House Tuesday. The two leaders have a rocky history, publicly insulting each other in recent months. National correspondent Acha El-Nashar reports from Washington.
From openly weighing U.S. military action in Colombia,
it sounds good to me,
to spending 2 hours with Colombian President Gustavo Petro at the White House, President Trump thawing relations with the country that borders Venezuela, whose former leader Nicolas Maduro was captured by U.S. forces exactly 1 month ago. Gustavo, a great honor. I love Colombia, says this handwritten note from Trump to Petro.
We got along very well. He and I weren't exactly the best of friends.
It was just October when the Trump administration sanctioned Petro and his wife and son over what the White House described as failing demonstrably to control the flow of drugs. Petro's government working to disprove the Trump administration's claims that they're complicit in the trafficking of drugs to the U.S. Hours before Petro's White House meeting, Colombian authorities announcing the extradition of a man known as Pipe Tulua to the United States to be prosecuted in Texas for drug trafficking charges. Trump has called Petro a socialist, very unpopular amongst his people, and an illegal drug leader.
He's got to watch his ass because he makes cocaine and they send it into the United States of America from Colombia.
Allegations Petro fervently denies.
For 20 years, and this is important, I have been fighting against the drug cartels at the cost of my family having to go into exile.
Petro hitting back, chiding Trump for his immigration enforcement tactics.
For us, ICE operates the same way as the Nazi and Italian brigades, the fascists.
Petro says Trump gave him a red Make America Great Again hat. The Colombian president says he took one of Trump's pens and added an S to it so it reads Make America's Great Again, a symbol, Petro says, of the goal of mutual respect between North and South America in this moment of profound tension. In Washington, I'm Atra El-Nashar for the National News Desk, America's News Now.
A new report from City Journal is taking a deep dive into one of the ICE watch groups in Minneapolis. The Journal reporting it reviewed the group's signal network trainings and even traced organizational support. Jeff Harris reports.
Titled Inside Minneapolis's ICE Watch Network, City Journal reporting a group called Defend 612 is one of the key organizers of the ongoing protests. Writing this week, it gained entry into its signal network while claiming the group oversees a massive number of different chats. City Journal reporting this week, Defend 612 lists ICE Watch trainings on its website, giving instructions to attendees on how to identify, document, and send out alerts about immigration enforcement, plus relay that information through signal chats, tactics the FBI is currently investigating.
And on this type of specific investigation, what you do, generally speaking, is you send out subpoenas, you collect data, you put people in grand juries, and you find out who broke the law. So this signal chat is something that we, the FBI, are looking at and spearheading.
The Journal reporting Defend 612 uses Signal to bring these training tactics to the streets. Some chats linking to instructions that train members on how to follow suspected ICE vehicles, and crowdsourced logs with a list of nearly 70 hotels where ICE agents have been known to stay. White House Border Czar Tom Homan commenting on that investigation last week.
I'm not going to answer a lot about that because I'm not going to show her hand, but they'll be held accountable. Justice is coming.
Meanwhile, in a recent interview, the head of the Minneapolis Teachers Union saying elected officials are involved in the anti-ICE agitation taking place in the city, suggesting they're in these signal chats.
Our bosses are in the signal chats with us. Our elected officials are in the chats with us. Everybody that's anybody is doing the work of protecting our neighbors, because that's how we show up in Minneapolis and St. Paul.
Now, as the protests continue in Minneapolis, video capturing this makeshift street checkpoint set up by anti-ICE agitators, stopping vehicles to ask those inside if they're ICE officers, a tactic Homan says needs to stop.
Stop impeding, stop interfering, stop violating the law, because we will arrest you.
Now, recent Harvard-Harris polling also showing when it comes to immigration enforcement, Americans believe 3 in 5 Democrats have been encouraging the resistance of ICE officers, while right around 57% say they oppose elected officials from encouraging that resistance. I'm Jeff Harris reporting from Washington.
More fallout from the Epstein files, the scandal stirring new controversy abroad. Authorities in the UK have launched a criminal investigation into Britain's former ambassador to the U.S., Peter Mandelson, who has now been forced to resign from the UK government. Files released by the DOJ show he may have shared confidential financial documents with the late convicted sex offender. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer appointed Mandelson to the role, and he is now apologizing to Epstein survivors.
He lied repeatedly to my team when asked about his relationship with Epstein before and during his tenure as ambassador. I regret appointing him. If I knew then what I know now, he would never have been anywhere near government.
Mandelson was forced to resign. This as Bill and Hillary Clinton have agreed to testify before the House Oversight Committee later this month. The former Secretary of State issued a direct challenge Thursday to the committee chair, James Comer, saying, quote, "So let's stop the games. If you want this fight, James Comer, let's have it in public. You love to talk about transparency. There's nothing more transparent than a public hearing, cameras on." Comer said this week that the subpoenas call for recorded private depositions, but said once finished, a public hearing could happen. A whistleblower is accusing National Intelligence Director Tulsi Gabbard of withholding access to classified information for political reasons. That's according to an Associated Press report. The Inspector General's office found the complaint was not credible. The whistleblower also claims Gabbard's office failed to report a potential crime to the DOJ. House Intelligence Committee ranking member Jim Himes says the whistleblower has the right to talk to Congress.
I'm not going to give up on making sure I understand the substance of the complaint, but the fact that it took 8 months to do what should have taken a month or two, that does not look good for the DNI.
House Intelligence Committee Chair Rick Crawford wrote on X he does not find the complaint credible, saying the ensuing media firestorm fed by speculation and little fact was an attempt to smear Director Gabbard and the Trump administration. The Trump administration has issued a new rule reclassifying roughly 50,000 federal workers. It allows agencies to shift senior staffers in policy into a new category, making them at-will employees who are easier to fire. The administration says this will let them quickly remove staffers who perform poorly, engage in misconduct, or obstruct presidential directives. Some unions and advocacy groups say they plan to sue over the new rule. New work requirements for the SNAP program are now taking effect in more states, leaving Americans wondering what exactly is changing and who is impacted. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team, and that's where we're going to start today. Emma, walk us through exactly what is going on, the changes, and specifically which families need to pay attention.
So biggest change here is essentially who now has to meet these work requirements to keep food assistance. So adults age 18 to 64 without dependent kids now need to work, volunteer, or participate in job training for at least 80 hours a month to continue getting these SNAP benefits beyond just a short time limit. Before, though, those work rules generally applied to only up to age 54, but under that new law, that requirement's now extending to people, you know, in their late 50s, early 60s.
And then if someone doesn't meet that requirement, what then? What happens?
So if they don't, basically the federal rules are going to limit SNAP benefits to just 3 months within a 3-year period. So unless they qualify for exemption, that'll be the case. That time limit has been part of SNAP for years, but now it really applies to a much larger group of people. And this is all stemming from that federal budget law that was passed a few months ago, which supporters say is meant to encourage work participation, while critics are warning that it could actually reduce access to food assistance for some vulnerable populations. The Congressional Budget Office, though, estimates that SNAP enrollment could drop by millions over the next decade as a result of these stricter requirements.
We'll watch it, monitor it. Emma, thank you.
Thanks.
And for more, later, Emma is going to join us to dig deeper into when and how these new rules will be rolling out in states nationwide.
Today, you can now get access to these steeply discounted prices.
The White House's new direct-to-consumer drug site. The discounts available to millions on Trump RX. At a suspected biolab raid in Las Vegas, the unsuspecting guests who slept just feet away from the potentially hazardous makeshift facility. New details. SWAT officers seized multiple refrigerators and vials containing unknown liquids and substances this week in a suspected biolab operation in Las Vegas. According to the arrest report, a house cleaner for the property that operated as an Airbnb fell deathly ill after being in the garage, which sparked the investigation. Investigators have linked the Las Vegas home to a now jailed Chinese national who they say operated an illegal biolab in Reedley, California. Diving deeper into the illegal Reedley lab in Fresno, the investigation started actually months before the public even knew about it. In October 2022, in December of 2022, a Reedley code enforcement officer noticed a green garden hose running through the wall of the warehouse that was supposed to be empty. The officer found test kits, manufacturing equipment, and supplies. By March of 2023, local officials served a warrant shutting down the lab over building code violations. And in October 2023, a federal complaint was filed against the owner of the lab, accusing him of making false statements to federal officers and misbranding medical devices. Jay Beishu was arrested. A congressional committee found he had received money from the People's Republic of China. His attorney denies this claim. Xu is due back in a federal courtroom in April. The man convicted of trying to assassinate then presidential candidate Donald Trump has been sentenced to life in prison by a Florida judge this week. Prosecutors say Ryan Ruth laid in wait for Trump at his West Palm Beach golf course in 2024. Meantime, the man accused of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk appeared in court this week. And again, there are calls to remove the prosecutor. I spoke with former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick earlier to dig deeper into this case. This week also, John, the man accused of shooting and killing Charlie Kirk appeared in court. And again, there are calls to remove the prosecutor. This is the second time, I believe, that the defense has actually pushed for this. Is that the strategy, do you think? Is it just maybe just to delay the case? What could this mean for the death penalty push? What are your expectations on all of that?
So, Didi, I think you're absolutely right. I think his legal team wants to do everything they can to delay this case because, after all, they say our client is facing the death penalty, so let's delay this trial as long as we can. So they're going to throw everything they can up against the board to see if anything sticks. The judge is not going to remove the whole prosecution team. Maybe one of the prosecutors will be removed, but the team is not going to be removed. But what this means is the judge and really the prosecutors, they want to be very careful and make sure that everything is done by the book because they know if Tyler Robinson gets the death penalty, there'll be years of appeals. The death penalty will not be off the table. These are just delays that his legal team is going to push on. Death penalty will remain on the table, but the judge, the prosecution, needs to make sure that everything is by the book so that from their standpoint, it's a fair trial and the results stand.
Former U.S. Attorney John Fishwick, thank you for joining us tonight on the National News Desk to break all of this down.
Thank you.
Coming up, Fraud Focus, the Trump administration ramping up its push to find and stop criminals exploiting taxpayer-funded programs. Plus, lawmakers are eyeing millionaires' wallets. The new tax plan on the table. The National News Desk team of reporters is bringing you the headlines from coast to coast. We're taking the pulse of America. And we start in Olympia, Washington, where lawmakers have introduced new bills to increase taxes on millionaires. The pair of proposals would increase the tax on the state's millionaires to nearly 10%. Here's how it would all work. The first $1 million of annual income would be deducted, and anything after that would be subject to the increased tax. But lawmakers are split on where to put the money, into Washingtonians or into the General Revenue Fund.
Let's not just throw this money to the general fund. I think each of those dollars should have a name and a job. And I have to question what is going to happen next year or 2 years or 5 years down the road should this pass.
If passed, the new income tax would take effect on January 1st, 2028, with the first payments due in April 2029. A group of BYU faculty, staff, students, and alumni spoke out against the inclusion of U.S. Customs and Border Protection Friday at the university's career fair. The group issuing a statement saying their concerns were not motivated by politics. Instead, they said, quote, "We believe the current domestic operations of these agencies are in direct conflict with the spiritual and ethical standards of our BYU community."
The community at UVU does have people who are outraged right now and who are willing to say something and to do something.
We're told the protest was peaceful and did not disrupt the job fair on campus. Coming up next, shutdown after a deadly listeria outbreak. Why the Virginia Boar's Head plant is confident the facility is now safe. Taking a look at the top trending stories on our website right now, the U.S. Southern Command said a lethal kinetic strike targeted a vessel operated by designated terrorist organizations. According to the post on X, 2 people were killed. No U.S. military members were injured. Throughout Operation Southern Spear, at least 119 people have been killed in strikes on suspected drug boats as part of Trump's campaign. And a Boar's Head deli meat processing plant in Virginia is back open this week after closing in 2024 for listeria contamination. The plant that was linked to a deadly outbreak leading to at least 10 deaths and dozens more sent to the hospital. The company's chief food safety officer says the facility has been rebuilt from the inside out to make sure no contamination remains. One of Italy's most beloved traditions is no longer free. Visitors to Rome's Trevi Fountain now have to pay €2 to enter. You can still see the fountain from outside the pay area. The city says the entry fee is to help with maintenance for the fountain. Those stories and more available right now at thenationaldesk.com. A recently published Government Accountability Office report estimates the federal government loses between $233 and $521 billion a year due to fraud. President Trump has been focusing on fraud in Minnesota with plans to expand those efforts nationwide. National correspondent Christine Frizzell lays out the plan from Washington.
Following allegations of widespread fraud by Somali Americans, GOP lawmakers on Capitol Hill blamed state Democratic leaders for ignoring and covering up the fraud for years.
Minnesota Democrats didn't just fail to stop the fraud. They made it easy and profitable, and in a totally lawless fashion, silenced anyone who pointed it out.
One witness at Wednesday's hearing also appeared in this viral video, purportedly showcasing the fraud at daycare centers and medical companies in Minnesota.
It's easily in excess of $30 billion when you take everything into account. You've got all of these NGOs, you've got nonprofits, you've got county money, you've got city money, you've got CCAP money, you've got another thing called Great Start. So there are all these piles of money that factor into the fraud.
Many of the investigations into fraud in Minnesota were actually carried out by President Biden's Justice Department, but billions of dollars remain missing as the Trump administration has announced it will expand its fraud crackdown. Vice President J.D. Vance said to help lead the effort.
We know that the fraud isn't just happening in Minneapolis, it's also happening in states like Ohio. It's happening in states like California.
California, a popular punching bag for the president, who started the year announcing the fraud investigation of California has begun. Governor Gavin Newsom says he's already been cracking down on legitimate fraud in his state as he and other Democrats blame Trump for actually perpetrating fraud.
He has slashed staffing at the Internal Revenue Service by more than a quarter, guaranteeing an increase in tax fraud, avoidance, and cheating, primarily by the super rich.
Others point out the president's firing of more than a dozen inspectors general, the dismantling of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and the pardoning of multiple people convicted of committing fraud. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National News Desk.
This launch represents the largest reduction in prescription drug prices in history by many, many times, and it's not even close. You're going to see numbers that you're not going to believe.
Trump RX website officially up and running now. It's a direct consumer marketplace aimed at helping Americans find discounted drugs. Patients will be given Trump RX coupons to use at the pharmacy when they pick up their prescriptions. Officials say the website is free to use and more medications will be added soon. Coming up next on the National News Desk, increasing cooperation. A closer look at what's happening on the ground in Minnesota as the Trump administration shifts immigration enforcement strategy. Plus, Republicans call it common sense. Democrats call it Jim Crow 2.0. I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins in Washington. Coming up, the high-stakes battle over voter ID and the SAVE Act. You're watching the National News Desk, America's News Now. Catch us live weekdays from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time, and anytime online at thenationaldesk.com. We'll be right back. The National News Desk, locally covered, nationally connected. The Justice Department isn't holding back, now seeking the death penalty for the man accused of shooting 2 National Guard members in D.C. The high-stakes fight ahead. Plus a quiet shift with global consequences. The White House's new plan to wean the U.S. off China for critical minerals. What that means for the American economy. And new changes to SNAP now taking effect in more states. What you need to know before benefits are impacted. From the nation's capital, this is the National News Desk, America's News Now. Thank you for being here with us. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and we begin this half hour with Border Czar Tom Homan announcing a major drawdown of federal agents in Minneapolis.
Effective immediately, we will draw down 700 people effective today. 700 law enforcement personnel. We have also fully integrated CBP personnel into the ICRO team structure under one unified chain of command.
The National News Desk, Jan Jeffcoat, spoke with Minnesota State Senator Michael Holstrom to discuss more on the drawdown and what's happening right now on the ground in Minnesota.
What do you make of this drawdown and what is happening right now on the ground there in Minnesota?
Yeah, well, the drawdown makes sense because, well, last week Donald Trump came out and for the last 2 weeks, the White House has been saying that they need access to our jails. If they get access to our jails, they won't need as many agents in Minnesota. And that's the only pathway forward. Well, they got it. They have access to our jails now. So that they're not going to need as many agents on the ground chasing these guys down because they're able to go right into the jail and get them when they're arrested. Previously, insanely, Minnesota refused to cooperate and wouldn't allow our local jails to hand over criminals after they were arrested and illegal aliens because they want to be a sanctuary state. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, I was going to say, why was that basic level of cooperation so controversial and what changed? What changed their mind?
Well, 3,000 ICE agents came into Minnesota and started going door to door and finding these individuals, and they found out that that's not conducive to the type of lifestyle that people in Minneapolis and people in Minnesota want. And the public came down hard and said, hey, why aren't we getting criminals out of Minnesota? If somebody breaks the law, if they're in jail, they're an illegal alien, why are we protecting these people? And public opinion shifted. The Democrats didn't have a choice anymore.
When you talk about public opinion shifting, when you look at some of mainstream media, when you look at these reports of these agitators, these demonstrators, you think that's how the majority of folks in Minnesota feel. What are your constituents telling you?
You know, it's funny. The most common thing I hear from my constituents is how much they support ICE, how much they are upset that they don't want the 700 agents to go. They want them to stick around. We know that illegal immigration is a problem in Minnesota, and I live close to the cities. My district is the next district over from the cities. So we are definitely recognizing this as a statewide problem, and people want it solved. Now, there is a loud contingent down in the cities who want to break things, they want to cause problems, they want to write death to America on walls. That Marxist insurgency does not speak for true Minnesota.
And also, there's a major scandal happening right now in your state where billions of taxpayer dollars have been stolen through that welfare fraud scandal. What's your take on this? How much do you think of this falls on the backs of elected leaders and elected officials?
I'd say the vast majority does. That's the other foot here. The reason that these people are so willing to be out in the street, the reason that they are putting up signs that saying, well, you're not going to get held accountable, come riot with us, is because the leadership at the highest levels of the state, Tim Walz, Keith Ellison, Mayor Frey, they come out and they are advocating for this type of anger and violence in rhetoric, because they know that if we're not talking about the streets being on fire, we're going to start talking about fraud again. And it is my opinion that if we genuinely have that conversation about fraud, Tim Walz and Keith Ellison are probably criminally complicit. They're certainly negligent.
Aren't folks in your state just mad as all get out when they think about how much taxpayer dollars were stolen from them?
It's the only thing people want to talk about. It really is. It's $9 billion in Minnesota is a large number. I know we're seeing larger numbers out of California, but per capita, Minnesota is such a wildly large number. And I'm glad that Minnesota was kind of the spear of the head here. We have the dumbest criminals in Minnesota, that first ones to get caught, but I think that we're going to be able to write a roadmap for the rest of the country on how we look into these programs and what the red flags are.
Finally, a new Harvard-Harris poll finds 67% of Americans oppose sanctuary policies. They support jails handing over criminal illegal aliens to ICE. So when you see numbers like this, what message should Washington and Minnesota leaders be taking from voters right now, sir?
Don't let up. Even in Minneapolis, a local media did a poll. Over 50% of people in Minneapolis think that we need access to jails. We need to get the criminal illegal aliens out. That is the right stance to take. Donald Trump is doing a great job. ICE is doing a great job. Keep it up. Go across the country. Continue to do this.
Minnesota State Senator Michael Holmstrom, we appreciate you joining us.
The Justice Department will be seeking the death penalty for the man accused of shooting 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C. DHA prosecutors informing the judge of their decision in federal court this week. Let's go to Jeff Harris.
Ramanola Lochinwall pleaded not guilty in federal court on Wednesday to 9 charges, including first-degree murder in connection to the November shooting of 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C., killing one while critically injuring the other. According to court documents, Lochinwall traveled from Washington state to the nation's capital in late November before ambushing the 2 officers, shooting them both in the head with a sub-nosed revolver. Sarah Beckstrom was pronounced dead the next day, while Andrew Wolf is still in recovery. D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announcing the upgraded charges just days after the fatal shooting.
She ended up being shot ambush style on the cold streets of Washington, D.C. By an individual who will now be charged with murder in the first degree.
Now, Lochinwall worked with the CIA for over a decade in Afghanistan before the U.S. military withdrew from the country. He then came to the United States in 2021. As for what's next in this case, the judge did schedule a status conference that's coming up on May 6.
Now to Georgia, where the FBI has announced 55 arrests from a raid of an international drug trafficking operation. The FBI says the group has ties to a Chinese drug supplier and were shipping meth and fentanyl as well as other narcotics around the United States. Meanwhile, First Lady Melania Trump had a private meeting with a freed American Israeli hostage and his wife. Keith Siegel was released from captivity last year after over 480 days in captivity. Hamas took Siegel and his wife, Aviva, from their home on October 7, 2023. She was released from custody 51 days later as part of a short-lived ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. The Trump administration is hoping to build a critical minerals trading bloc with its allies and partners. Vice President J.D. Vance says this initiative is a chance to make market prices more predictable as the international exchange fails.
The Trump administration is proposing a concrete mechanism to return the global critical minerals market to a healthier, more competitive state. A preferential trade zone for critical minerals protected from external disruptions through enforceable price floors.
Vance says reference prices will be maintained for members of the preferential zone through adjustable tariffs to uphold pricing integrity. He adds that they want to eliminate cheap critical minerals flooding into the market, undercutting domestic manufacturing. This comes after China closed the flow of rare earth elements in response to the president's tariffs. The Supreme Court cleared the way for California to use its new voting map. The White House claimed one of the districts was redrawn based on race instead of politics. The High Court sided with the state. California's redistricting, which benefits Democrats, came after a redistricting in Texas that benefited Republicans. California's new map will put 5 GOP seats in play. Texas's redistricting also puts 5 House seats in play. The issue of voter ID is back in the spotlight on Capitol Hill as Republicans press the Senate to take up the SAVE Act. But Democrats argue it could block eligible voters from casting a ballot. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins reports from Washington.
Republicans are ramping up pressure on the Senate to vote on the SAVE Act, legislation that would require Americans to prove their citizenship when registering to vote and to show identification at the polls.
Who would not want voter ID? Only somebody that wants to cheat. Think of it. We don't have voter ID, and the Democrats don't want it. And the reason they don't want it is because they want to cheat.
The bill has already passed the House, but its future in the Senate remains uncertain, with GOP leaders stopping short of committing to a timeline of bringing it to the floor for a vote.
We will get a vote on the SAVE Act at some point, and I'm not sure exactly what that context will be.
Democrats calling it a step backward for voting rights.
The SAVE Act is nothing more than Jim Crow 2.0. It would lead to massive purges that inevitably remove legitimate American citizens who have the right to vote from voter rolls.
House Republicans remain firmly committed to the policy.
It's a top priority of the president. It's a top priority of House Republicans, and it should be all Republicans.
And so does President Trump.
Voter ID is a highly popular and common sense policy that the president wants to pursue.
Polling suggests broad support for some form of voter ID. A Pew Research Center survey found more than 9 in 10 Republicans and about 7 in 10 Democrats favor photo ID requirements. And a Gallup poll from last fall showed majority support across parties for requiring proof of citizenship for first-time voter registration. Some Republicans have called for the Senate to bypass filibuster rules to get around the 60-vote threshold needed to advance the SAVE Act. Senate Majority Leader John Thune said the option will be discussed, but nothing is decided yet. In Washington, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
President Donald Trump says his administration is pursuing $1 billion in damages from Harvard University to restore federal funding. President Trump made that comment on his Truth Social account, disputing a New York Times report that his administration has dropped demands for a financial payment from the university. The president has accused Harvard of anti-Semitism and wants to withhold research money. In December, the White House appealed a ruling that found it unlawfully ended more than $2 billion in grants to Harvard. New SNAP benefit work requirements are going into effect this week for certain states as the timelines vary nationwide. Let's go to Emma Withrow from the Fact Check team. And these SNAP work rules, they aren't hitting everywhere at the same time, but just tell us how this is rolling out across states.
Yeah, it's kind of confusing. States are doing it on different timelines here. So some states started enforcing the expanded work requirements this month, while others are phasing them into like temporary waivers as they start to expire. And the reason why some states get waivers and others don't is because federal law allows waivers in areas with really high unemployment, but those standards are now a little bit tighter. Per KFF Health News, though, states can only waive the work rules in areas where unemployment exceeds 10%, which is much higher of a bar than we've seen in the past.
So if this impacts you right now, in practical terms, what do viewers need to do?
So you essentially need to understand what counts as work. So according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, qualifying activities include paid employment, approved job training programs, or volunteer work that adds up to at least 80 hours a month. And if they're exempt, they'll probably need to document that. So exemptions still exist for people with certain disabilities or for caregivers of younger children. But experts cited by the AP News say that paperwork and verification is going to matter more as states start to tighten up enforcement efforts.
So get your paperwork together, take the proper steps ahead of time. Emma, thank you.
Thank you.
And for more on this Factor Team topic, including links to their sources, scan the QR code on your screen or visit thenationaldesk.com.
And welcome back to the National News Desk. Our Washington Bureau covers the nation's capital every day, and our team of correspondents reports on the important issues facing the country and how they impact you. The issue of voter ID is back in the spotlight on Capitol Hill. Republicans pressing the Senate to take up a bill that would require proof of citizenship to register to vote and would also mandate photo ID at the polls. National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, polling shows both of those ideas have overwhelming support among Americans. So why are those opposed to the bill saying it's a bad idea?
Well, Steve, congressional support is really split along party lines here on Capitol Hill. Democrats are strongly opposed to this bill. They call it a step backward for voting rights, arguing it will inadvertently disenfranchise American citizens. So just an example of what they're talking about. An impacted group could be married women who have changed their last name, and now their last name doesn't match the name on their birth certificate. So when they're trying to prove citizenship, there can be a lot of red tape for them to jump through just to be able to vote. Now, Republicans on the other side remain firmly committed to the policy, calling it common sense. But Steve, here's a bit of Democrats' argument against it.
The SAVE Act is nothing more than Jim Crow 2.0. It would lead to massive purges that inevitably remove legitimate American citizens who have the right to vote from voter rolls.
Who would not want voter ID? Only somebody that wants to cheat. Think of it. We don't have voter ID. And the Democrats don't want it. And the reason they don't want it is because they want to cheat.
And this is a top priority for President Trump. So some Republicans have called for the Senate to bypass the filibuster rules to get around the 60-vote threshold needed to advance the SAVE Act. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has said that option will be discussed. But, Steve, right now nothing's been decided yet.
National correspondent Kayla Gaskins, thank you. Meanwhile, Congress is rushing to catch up to the advancements of self-driving cars, which can now be tested or used commercially in almost every part of the country. National correspondent Atra Elnishard, executives from Tesla and Waymo were on Capitol Hill this past week. They were urging Washington to issue federal safety standards. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, these executives and a lot of the lawmakers agreed this is no longer the stuff of science fiction. The future is here. And as Ted Cruz, Senator of Texas, who leads the Senate Commerce Committee holding this hearing, said, like it or not, self-driving cars are here and they are going to be central to the future of our roadways. So what these tech companies, Waymo, Tesla, are asking from Congress is to create, like you said, this federal framework for safety that they say is necessary so that they can really expand their both testing of these self-driving cars and the commercial deployment of them. Right now, they're dealing with a massive patchwork of about 26 or so state laws that just kind of, like all AI products, make it a mess to operate. So, of course, profit is the number one driver of their ask here. These are companies, after all. But the reason lawmakers are so engaged is, for the most part, Democrats and Republicans believe there are at least two key national interests at play here. One goes beyond our borders, and that is beating China in the race to create and master these self-driving cars. It's sort of, again, like other AI issues, a mini space race of sorts. And then the other is safety, right? Pretty much everyone in the room in this Senate Commerce Committee hearing this week agreed that self-driving cars technology can significantly cut down the dangerous human errors that unfortunately we see happen all of the time on our roadways. Take a listen to what the chief safety officer of Waymo said.
Data from our first 127 million fully autonomous miles indicates our driver is 10 times less likely to be involved in a serious injury or worse crash compared to human drivers where we operate.
Now, here's something that they didn't really talk about. And that is the fact that the American public, generally speaking, does not want to buy what they're selling. Americans are not ready for self-driving cars. A poll that AAA did last year found only 13% say they trust self-driving cars, and over 60% said that they're afraid of them. So let's say they get this national framework that they want from the federal government. Another issue that Democrats on the committee raised is the DOGE cuts really cut down the manpower of the federal agency that would be responsible for upholding these safety standards. And coincidentally, Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, who has massive ambitions for his company's self-driving car program, may now rely on the manpower he helped to cut at these federal agencies.
National correspondents Audra Elnishar, Kayla Gaskins, thank you both for your excellent reporting and your hard work. Back to you.
Coming up, Utah is drying out. The state's main water source now vanishing. Plus, a dog stuck for days in a hidden space under a home. The dramatic rescue from right under their feet. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering issues that matter to you. We are taking the pulse of America. And we start in Ohio with a dramatic rescue of a dog trapped beneath her owner's home.
Her rescue was quite dramatic.
Yep. If you can stand, we'll pull up gentle on him. Another foot.
As firefighters pulled a pup named Blue out of a well.
You guys got a good grip?
And right into her family's dining room.
They came in, they straight up told me, if you want, the only way to get her is we got to cut a hole in the floor. And before you could even finish the sentence, I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's cut a hole in the floor.
She'd been missing for 3 days when she was rescued Sunday. Cody Helmuth is one of Blue's heroes.
She is so excited to see me down there. It was hard to get her harness on and get her rigged up to where she'd safely come up.
Jayla Hayden and her husband didn't have a clue Blue was trapped right under their feet. On Sunday, they finally heard her cries.
You could hear her in our dining room, as loud as could be.
That's when they realized there was a well hidden in the crawl space. After 3 days without food or water, the resilient rescue pup was back in her family's arms.
Years of pressure from taxpayers, lawmakers, and animal advocacy groups has led to multiple federal agencies banning animal research involving dogs and cats. Now, White Coat Waste Project, a watchdog group that fights government-funded animal experiments, discovered NIH just awarded millions in funding for new research involving cats and dogs. These projects include inducing strokes in puppies and kittens and breeding dogs to suffer blindness and bleeding disorders. In a letter sent to U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr., South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace is asking the HHS to prohibit taxpayer funding of experiments on cats and dogs.
Unfortunately, we are in drought right now.
Hayden Mahan with the National Weather Service says Utah is actually at a normal amount of precipitation, but
we're not getting it in the form of snow. And that's what we want to see this time of year, because the snowpack is what sustains our water resources.
Mahan says 95% of our water comes from snowmelt.
Where does that put us in the future?
In terms of the short term, we are still benefiting from our record-breaking winter back in 2023, but we're quickly eating into a lot of that water.
Still ahead, what is the most important problem facing society today? The new survey that found different worries in the U.S. compared to other countries, and the controversial and historic statue soon to be reconstructed on the White House's lawn. Most people around the world say the economy is the most important problem facing their country. But in America, we say politics and polarization is our biggest issue. According to a new Gallup poll, a median of 23% of adults across 107 countries named the economy as the most important problem. 10% of people say employment and working conditions are the biggest issues, and 88%, I should say, government spending, debt, and corruption are the most pressing problem to them. Meantime, President Trump wants to install a Christopher Columbus statue on White House grounds. That's according to 3 people with knowledge of the pending move. The statue is set to be established on the south side of the grounds. It's a reconstruction piece unveiled in Baltimore that was dumped into the city's harbor by 2020 protesters. The Washington Post reports the statue may be transported to Washington in the coming weeks. And that'll be all for us on the weekend edition of the National News Desk, America's News Now. Don't forget, you can catch us live from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. and 10 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time. Just check your local listings. You can also watch us online and catch up with the latest headlines on the nationaldesk.com. Thanks for watching the weekend edition of the National News Desk. I'm Dee Dee Gatton, and from all of us here, have a great week. We'll see you on Monday.